She had a reservation at the best table in the room. He had ironed his only good shirt. Neither of them knew the other existed, and both of them were about to be left sitting alone in a restaurant full of couples while the snow came down outside like the city itself was trying to bury the night. What happened next wasn't romantic. It wasn't perfect. It was two people at the end of their rope sharing a meal they hadn't planned, saying things they hadn't meant to say out loud. And somehow, that changed everything. Hit like, drop your city in the comments, and stay until the end, because this one is going to stay with you. The snow had been falling since 4 in the afternoon. By the time Logan Reed pulled up to Aurelius on North Michigan Avenue, the sidewalk was already 2 inches deep, and the doorman was working a second shovel. Logan sat in his car for a moment with the engine still running, watching the valets try to keep up, watching the couples spill out of cabs and taxis and ride-shares, the women laughing and pulling their coats tighter, the men holding doors with that particular kind of studied casualness that meant they were trying hard but didn't want to look like it. He checked his phone. No new messages. He turned the engine off. His name was Logan Reed, and he was 32 years old, and he had not been on a date in 14 months. He knew the exact number because the last one had been 2 weeks before Noah's birthday, and that one had ended badly enough that he'd spent the walk back to his car rehearsing the story, so it would at least be funny later. It hadn't been funny later. It had just been embarrassing in the way that most things are embarrassing when you're a man raising a kid by yourself and you've spent 6 years learning how to be a father and have somehow forgotten, in the process, how to be a person who talks to another adult at dinner without checking the time. He got out of the car. The restaurant was warm and crowded and full of the particular kind of lighting that makes everyone look better than they are. Logan gave his name to the hostess, a young woman with a tablet and practiced patience, and she walked him to a table near the window. Good table. Corner booth. View of the street. Someone had put real thought into the reservation, that someone was his co-worker Dana, who had been trying to set him up with her friend Kayla for 4 months, and had finally just made the reservation herself and told both of them to show up. "You'll like her," Dana had said. "She's normal. She's funny. She's not going to ask about your feelings on the first date." "What's her last name?" "Just show up, Logan." He sat down and looked at the menu without reading it. The table next to him was already occupied. A woman sitting alone on the far side of a booth meant for 2, her coat folded neatly beside her, a glass of water in front of her that she hadn't touched. She was looking at her phone with the particular expression of someone who is pretending to look at their phone. Dark hair pulled back. No nonsense. She was maybe his age, maybe a year or 2 younger. The coat folded next to her was cashmere. He noticed that because his mother had owned a cashmere coat she'd treated like a second child. He looked back at his menu. 20 minutes passed. He ordered water, then coffee. He checked his phone twice, then set it face down on the table because he knew if he kept checking it, he was going to start calculating exactly how long he'd been sitting there, and that was going to make everything worse. At 6:40, a message from Dana. "Hey, weird situation. Kayla's not coming. Something came up. I'm so sorry. I'll explain later. Eat dinner anyway. The steak there is incredible." Logan stared at the message for a moment. He put the phone in his pocket. He thought about Noah at home with Mrs. Gallagher from downstairs, who charged $12 an hour and always left the kitchen cleaner than she found it. He thought about the ironed shirt. He thought about the drive-in from Pilsen, 45 minutes in the snow. He thought about ordering the steak. Then the woman at the next table made a short, sharp sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh, and said, mostly to herself, "Okay, all right, that's that then." Logan looked over. She was staring at her phone. Her jaw was set. She had the look of someone who has just received confirmation of something they'd already suspected and was deciding in real time how they felt about being right. He didn't say anything. It wasn't his business. But then she looked up and caught him looking, and he was too slow to look away, and they held eye contact for one uncomfortable second before he said, "I'm sorry, I was just—" "Were you stood up?" she asked. He blinked. "Yeah." "Me too." She held up her phone briefly, then set it back down. 15 minutes ago. I've been deciding whether to leave or just eat anyway." "I just got the same message," Logan said. "My coworker's friend. Something came up." "My assistant's colleague, same story." A beat. Are we sure they didn't know each other? He almost laughed. I hope not. That would be too much. She looked at him for a moment, not the way people look at each other when they're deciding if they're attracted to each other, more the way people look at each other in airport lounges when a flight's been delayed and they're trying to figure out if the stranger next to them is going to be a problem or just another person to wait alongside. I'm going to eat, she said. I drove 20 minutes in the snow and I haven't had anything since noon. You're welcome to move your wine glass if you want. It was a strange offer. He knew it was strange and he accepted it anyway because the alternative was eating alone in a corner booth designed for two, which was somehow worse than the date not showing up in the first place. He moved to her table. Quote, her name, she told him, was Mara. It was not her name. He wouldn't find that out until later, but at the time she gave it with the flat certainty of someone who's used an alias enough times that it no longer feels like lying. It feels like putting on a coat. She did it because she always did it. She had learned years ago that telling strangers her actual name changed the conversation immediately, redirected it toward things she didn't want to talk about, turned a dinner into an interview or a pitch, or occasionally something worse. Her actual name was Madison Hart. If you worked in tech, you knew the name. If you followed business news, you'd seen the face. If you'd been anywhere near a Forbes list in the last 2 years, you'd read the profile. 30 years old, founder, and CEO of Solvara Technologies, one of the fastest-growing enterprise software companies in the country, valued at just over $2 billion and climbing. None of that was something she wanted to explain over calamari to a man she'd never met. So she was Mara. And he was Logan Reed, which was actually his name, and which he offered with a handshake that was slightly too firm because he'd been practicing confident handshakes the way some people practice speeches, not because he needed to, but because the parts of himself he didn't entirely trust tended to surface in social situations, and a firm handshake at least bought him time. What do you do? She asked. Construction. I manage projects, commercial, mostly. Some residential. I just finished a mixed-use building over in Wicker Park, 9 months behind schedule. He said the last part with the tone of a man who has made peace with a war. You? She picked up her menu. I work in tech. What kind of tech? The kind that isn't interesting at dinner. She looked at him over the top of the menu. I mean, that kindly. He almost smiled. Fair enough. They ordered. She got the lamb. He got the steak because Dana had told him to, and because it turned out he was hungrier than he'd thought. The bread came first, and they ate it without ceremony, the way two people eat when they're not trying to impress each other because the thing they were trying to impress each other for never materialized. So, she said. So. Who set you up? You said a coworker. Dana. She's my project coordinator. She's been trying to set me up for about a year. He tore a piece of bread. She means well. She just has this theory that she calls it stuck, like I'm a drain that needs clearing. Madison looked at him. Are you? Probably, he said. Yeah, a little. What does that mean? He considered the question with more seriousness than she'd probably intended. My wife died, he said, 4 years ago. She had a brain aneurysm. She was 27. He said it directly, without the careful softening that most people used, because he'd learned that the softening made it worse. It made people feel like they'd hurt you just by asking. We have a son. He's 8. So for the last 4 years, it's mostly been work and Noah, in that order. And I don't do this a lot. Madison was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, she said. Not the reflexive kind, the kind that meant she'd actually heard him. Thank you. He looked at her. So who set you up? My assistant, Brendan. He found someone through a mutual. It doesn't matter. It's the 3rd time he's tried. She turned her wine glass once. He thinks I need a personal life. Do you? Probably, she said, and matched his timing with such precision that they both noticed it. The food came. They ate. The snow outside was heavier now, and the restaurant was filling up with people escaping it. Groups crowding the bar, couples pressing into corners, a couple near the door shaking snow off their coats and laughing. The room had that specific restaurant in winter quality, The world outside cold and difficult, everything in here warm and slightly unreal. Tell me about the sun, Madison said. She said it not the way people ask about children when they feel obligated, but the way people ask about things when they're genuinely curious and not sure if it's appropriate to be curious. Noah, Logan said the name with a different weight than any other word he'd used all evening. He's 8. He's a serious kid, like genuinely serious. He thinks about things. He'll come to me at 9 o'clock at night and say something like, "Dad, what happens to the trees in winter? Do they know it's cold?" And then he'll wait for an actual answer, like he's already rejected the easy version and he wants the real one. That's unusual for 8. Yeah, he went through a phase last year where he was worried about the park near our house because they were trimming some of the old oaks and he wanted to know if it hurt them. Logan paused. I didn't know the answer, so we went to the library and looked it up together. What did you find? That trees don't have nervous systems, but that doesn't mean they don't respond to stress. They do. They send chemical signals when they're wounded. He looked slightly embarrassed, the way people look when they realize they've become unexpectedly interested in something. We spent 3 hours in that library. He took notes. Madison laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was the real thing. Short, genuine, slightly surprised. He takes notes? In a composition book with a picture of a frog on the cover that he found at a garage sale. He considers it important. How did you two end up in Pilsen? You said, I grew up there. Left for a few years. Came back when it made sense to be somewhere I knew. He refilled his water glass. It's good for him. There's a community there, people who check in. Mrs. Gallagher downstairs watches him when I'm on site. The guy next door, Eddie, taught Noah to play chess last winter. They play on Sundays. He paused. It's not a bad life, it's a specific life. She watched him while he said this. She did it without trying to hide that she was watching, which he found disarming. What? He said. Nothing. You describe your life the way someone describes a place they love, but that's also been hard. Like, you're being fair to both things at once. He looked at her carefully. You're direct. I've been told that's off-putting. Not to me. A beat passed. Outside, the snow came down in sheets now, and a cab slid briefly at the intersection, recovered, moved on. Tell me about the empty apartment, Logan said. She looked up. You mentioned it, he said. When you were on your phone, I wasn't listening on purpose, but you said, I'm just going back to an empty apartment again. I wasn't sure if that was a thing to bring up. Probably not. But, she turned her wine glass again. It was a habit, something to do with her hands when she was thinking. I live in a penthouse off the Magnificent Mile, 1,200 square feet, floor-to-ceiling windows, view of the lake. It costs more per month than most people make in a year. She said all of this without particular pride or embarrassment. I eat breakfast standing up at the kitchen counter because I haven't gotten around to buying chairs for the breakfast nook, and I've lived there for 3 years. I work 16-hour days and I'm good at it, and I've built something that matters. I actually believe that. But I come home and there's nothing. Not just nobody. Nothing. Like the apartment is just a charging station. She picked up her wine and drank. A charging station, he repeated. That's bleak, isn't it? A little. Yeah. She looked out the window. I tell myself that the work is enough. That it's supposed to feel like this at this stage, building something, making sacrifices. That's the story you tell yourself. She paused. And then your assistant sets you up on a blind date and the guy doesn't show up and you're sitting at a table for 20 minutes by yourself and the story gets harder to tell. What's the company? He asked. I told you. You told me it's the kind that isn't interesting at dinner. I'm asking anyway. She gave him a long look. Then, enterprise software, workflow automation. We help organizations eliminate inefficiency between departments. It's genuinely less interesting than it sounds. Then why'd you build it? Because I grew up watching my mother spend 14 hours a day working a job where half her time was wasted on broken systems and bad processes, and she still had nothing at the end of it. I wanted to fix that. At scale. She said this simply, without the burnished quality it would have had in an interview. The money was incidental. Was it? At first. Now it's complicated. Now there are investors and board members, and quarterly reports, and the gap between why I started and what I do every day gets harder to see across. But you can still see it. On good days, she looked at him. Most of this is stuff I don't say at dinner. I've noticed. Why are you easy to talk to? He thought about that. I'm not, usually. I think you're the kind of person who says the real thing when it's easier not to. And when somebody's doing that, it's hard not to match it. She absorbed that. The check came eventually. They argued about it briefly. She reached for it first, he objected. She pointed out that his not objecting would have been worse, he agreed. She paid. He made a note to himself to figure out how to address that next time, and then thought, next time. Outside, the snow was extraordinary. The street had gone quiet, the way streets go quiet under real snow. Soft, muffled, a kind of enforced stillness. They stood under the awning for a moment, both having just realized that whatever this evening had become, it was about to end. The park near my house, Logan said, by the community garden. There's a coffee stand there that opens at 7, even in the worst weather. The guy who runs it is named Ferris, and he plays Cuban music that you can hear from half a block away. She looked at him. On Saturday mornings, he said. If you wanted, it's very different from this. Madison looked at the street, at the snow, at the cab that was idling at the corner waiting for a fare that hadn't come yet. She thought about the penthouse. She thought about the breakfast nook without chairs. What time? She said. 7:30? But there's nowhere to sit, so you have to stand. I can stand. Okay. She turned up her coat collar and stepped out from under the awning without looking back because she was the kind of person who made a decision and moved without second-guessing it in front of an audience. He watched her walk toward the cab, pull the door, and get in. The cab pulled into the snow and disappeared down Michigan. Logan stood under the awning for another moment. He was smiling, which felt strange because the evening had technically been a disaster. The drive in the snow, the iron shirt, the date that never came. And underneath the smile was something else, something cautious and careful, the particular wariness of a man who's learned that wanting things can be expensive. He thought about Noah at home with Mrs. Gallagher, probably already asleep, the composition book with the frog on the cover sitting on his nightstand. He thought about trees sending chemical signals when they're wounded. He walked to his car. On Saturday, he got there first. It was 18 degrees and the park was mostly empty. A few runners, a woman walking a dog that looked like it resented her for the decision, the community garden beds covered in frost and last year's stalks. Ferris had his cart set up under the bare arms of the biggest oak tree, the one the neighborhood had apparently been arguing about for years, old enough that the city was afraid to touch it. Cuban music came from a small Bluetooth speaker zip-tied to the cart handle, something with a trumpet. Logan bought a coffee, put his hands around the cup, and waited. She came at 7:32 wearing a coat that was not the cashmere one from the restaurant. This one was navy wool with wooden buttons, the kind of coat that's warm but doesn't announce itself. She wore flat boots. Her hair was down. She looked, for the first time since he'd met her, like a person who hadn't just come from somewhere important. You wore the practical coat, he said. You noticed the coat. My mother had a cashmere coat. I notice coats. She bought a coffee from Ferris, who played a slightly livelier song as if he'd recognized an opportunity. They stood with their cups in the cold under the oak tree. Tell me something you haven't told anyone, she said. He looked at her. We just got here. I know. He thought about it while he drank his coffee. The wind moved through the bare branches above them. Some nights, he said, after Noah's asleep, I sit in the kitchen and I talk to my wife. Not out loud. I don't think she's there. I know she's not there. It's the only time I let myself miss her completely without trying to function through it. He paused. I've never said that to anyone. Madison was quiet for a moment. That doesn't sound crazy. No? It sounds like you figured out a way to carry something very heavy without dropping it. He looked at the ground, then back at her. Your turn. She wrapped both hands around her cup. I have a dog toy in my desk drawer, she said. At my office. It's a little squeaky avocado. I bought it 2 years ago when I thought I was going to get a dog, but then I had 3 months straight of 12-hour days and I realized I couldn't keep a dog alive, so I didn't get one. She paused. I still have the toy in the drawer. I don't know why. I think it's because throwing it away would mean admitting that I chose the job over the dog, and I'm not ready to be that person. Logan didn't laugh. He nodded. You keep the avocado, he said. I keep the avocado. The Cuban trumpet played on. Somewhere across the park, the woman with the resentful dog had disappeared behind a tree. Ferris refilled their cups without being asked, because Ferris was the kind of man who understood what was happening, even when the people involved hadn't figured it out yet. There were 4 Saturdays before anything shifted. They were careful at first, the kind of careful that people are when they've both been burned by something and they don't want to use the word careful out loud because saying it is an admission that they're scared. They met in the park, then started walking. They moved from standing under the oak tree to walking through the neighborhood, Logan pointing out buildings he'd worked on, a brick facade on Cermak he'd done 3 years ago, a loading dock conversion on 18th that he was proud of in the way a craftsman is proud of something nobody else notices but him. Madison listened the way very few people listened, not waiting for her turn to talk. Actually following the thread of what he was saying, asking questions that came from genuine curiosity. Why did they use that stone? What does it mean when the framing is exposed? How do you look at a city block and know where the bones are holding? You love it, she said on the 3rd Saturday. The work? The city. You look at buildings like they're old friends. Their history, he said. Every building was a decision somebody made. Most of them were the wrong decision at the time, and they still ended up becoming part of how the place looks and feels. There's something in that. He stopped at a corner and looked at a 3-flat across the street, narrow and old, painted an unfortunate shade of beige. That one has good bones. Whoever renovated it hated it. She laughed. How can you tell? The windows are all wrong. You don't put vinyl replacement windows in a building from 1910. It's like giving someone a bad haircut. The face is right, but everything's off. She looked at the building. Now I see it. You can't unsee it, sorry. Don't apologize. She looked at him sideways. I like seeing things more clearly. They walked. The city was still cold, but the snow had settled and hardened, and the sky was that particular flat white of a Chicago February that was less like weather and more like a state of being. I told my assistant I was taking Saturday mornings off, she said. How'd that go? He tried to schedule them in my calendar. Did you let him? I did not. A beat. He's worried. Brendan, he thinks I'm going through something. Are you? She looked at him. I don't know yet. She said this honestly, which he appreciated, because the alternative was to say something reassuring, and she wasn't built for reassurance when she didn't mean it. Noah met her on the 4th Saturday. Logan hadn't planned it. He'd told Mrs. Gallagher he'd be back by 9, but Noah had been up since 6 and had refused to stay inside and had ultimately exercised a child's particular talent for making an argument through sheer persistence until Logan had bundled him up and brought him along, telling him they were meeting a friend. What friend? Noah had asked. Her name's, well, I call her Mara. He'd deal with the name situation later. She's someone I met. Noah had processed this with the serious deliberateness he applied to most information. Is she nice? I think so. Does she like trees? I don't know. Ask her. She was at Ferris's cart when they arrived, already holding 2 cups. She looked down at Noah with the particular expression of an adult who isn't sure of the protocol for encountering a child unexpectedly, somewhere between careful and genuinely interested. Noah looked at her for a moment. Then he said, Do you know what a cambium layer is? Logan closed his eyes briefly. Madison crouched down to his level. The living layer between the bark and the wood, she said. It's how the tree grows. Every year it adds a new ring. Noah stared at her, then looked at Logan, then back at her. Dad said he didn't know. He didn't look it up yet, she said. I have a book about it, Noah said, with pictures. You can borrow it. I'd like that, she said, and she meant it in the way that the true things get meant, without thought, without strategy, without anything behind it except that it was true. Logan watched his son and this woman standing in the cold under the oak tree, Noah already talking about the cambium layer and whether trees could communicate through their roots, the way he talked when he'd found an audience that could keep up, and he felt something shift in his chest, something that wasn't quite happiness and wasn't quite grief, but was some third thing that lived between them, a feeling like pressure releasing slowly. He stood back a little and let them talk. Ferris played something soft and slow. The tree's bare branches made a sound like paper in the wind. Logan drank his coffee and watched the two of them and thought about how there is no clean line between the life you've had and the life that's starting, how one becomes the other without announcement, how the hardest part is that you don't recognize the moment until you're already past it. He thought about a building from 1910 with bad windows. He thought about good bones. The flat Chicago sky sat above them, heavy and white and full of the kind of patience that only winter has, waiting for whatever was supposed to come next. The name thing came out on a Tuesday, not at the park, not over coffee, not in any setting that would have made it easier. It came out at a hardware store on Halstead, of all places, because Logan had needed to pick up grout and Madison had texted to ask if she could come along, which had surprised him. Not the asking, but the phrasing. Can I come? Not I'll meet you there. The small grammar of it had meant something, though he hadn't examined it too closely. They were standing in the tile and adhesive aisle when her phone rang and she answered it without thinking. And the voice on the other end, Brendan, efficient and slightly panicked the way Brendan always was, said loudly enough that Logan caught it. Madison, the Hargrove call was moved to 3. I need you to confirm. She said, I'll call you back, and hung up. Logan put the grout down. Madison, he said. She looked at him with the expression of someone who has just been caught not at something shameful, but at something they'd been managing carefully and were now out of time on. It's my actual name, she said. Madison Hart. He looked at her for a moment, then, You told me Mara. I know. Why? She leaned against the shelf of tile adhesive. Because when people know my name, the conversation changes. I become something to pitch to, or be intimidated by, or perform for. And I didn't... She stopped. I just wanted one thing that was regular. That was just 2 people at a restaurant who both got stood up. Logan picked up the grout again. He turned it in his hands. Madison Hart, he said slowly. Solvara Technologies. You looked it up. You said enterprise software? My office uses your company's platform. He looked at her sideways. We've been having problems with the scheduling module. A beat. I'll tell the product team. It drops tasks if 2 people are assigned to the same deadline. I know. It's on the Q2 roadmap. He put the grout in the basket. They stood there for a second, the fluorescent lights of the hardware store doing nothing flattering to either of them. Are you angry? She asked. No. He started walking toward the register. I get it. I don't entirely like it, but I get it. She followed. Those are 2 different things. Yeah, they are. He got in line. But you're here, in a hardware store on a Tuesday afternoon, with your real name. He glanced at her. That counts for something. She stood beside him in line. Outside the store window, a bus went past, close enough that the windows rattled. She didn't say anything else, and neither did he, and the silence between them was not comfortable exactly. It had some friction in it, but it held. That was the thing about them, he was starting to realize. The silences held. March came in cold and then turned itself around halfway through, the way Chicago sometimes did. Like the city had remembered something and changed its mind about winter. The lakefront opened up, and people appeared on the paths like they'd been stored somewhere underground and released all at once, blinking into the light and suspicious of the warmth. They were spending more time together now, not constantly. Both of them had lives that didn't pause, but consistently, the way you become consistent about something when it started to matter. She came to the park on Saturdays. He took his lunch break near the Solvara building on Wednesday when he had a site visit nearby, and they ate sandwiches on a bench outside like 2 people with nowhere more important to be, which neither of them technically was. It was on one of those Wednesdays that she told him about her parents. They were on the bench, the lake visible between the buildings if you angled yourself right. She'd been talking about a board meeting the previous week, Something about projections and investor expectations, and the particular exhaustion of having to defend things you know are right to people who want you to be more cautious. And Logan had been listening in the way he listened, following the actual shape of the problem, not just waiting for the feeling part. "Your mother," he said when she paused. "The one who worked the broken systems job. Is she still around?" Madison looked at the lake gap between the buildings. "She died when I was 19. Heart failure." She said it with the flat steadiness of something said so many times it had worn smooth. She worked for a logistics company for 22 years, and the last 5 were the worst because they'd installed a new operation system that didn't work, and nobody could get anyone to fix it. And she was spending 3 hours a day on workarounds just to do her actual job. She paused. She used to come home and say, "I don't understand why it has to be this hard," and I couldn't tell her. "I was 19 and I didn't know." Another pause, smaller. "Now I know how to fix it, and she's not here." Logan was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is that why you work 16-hour days?" "Probably, in part." She unwrapped the second half of her sandwich. "Brendan says I work like I'm trying to outrun something. He's annoyingly perceptive for someone whose main job is to manage my calendar." "What do you say when he says that?" "I say he should manage my calendar more and analyze me less." "And then?" "And then I work another 2 hours." She looked at Logan. "I know what it sounds like." "It doesn't sound bad," he said. "It sounds like someone who turned grief into momentum. That's not the worst thing to be." He looked at his sandwich. "The worst thing is when you turn it into a wall." She looked at him. "Is that what you did?" "For a while." He said it plainly. "After Claire died," that's her name, Claire, "I put Noah and work between me and everything else. And I told myself it was practical, that it was what the situation required. And it was. For a while." He peeled the wrapper back. "But at some point, the situation changes and the wall doesn't." They ate in silence for a minute. "What changed it?" she asked. "He did." Logan said it simply. "Noah. He started asking questions I didn't know how to answer, and I realized I'd been so focused on keeping him okay that I'd stopped trying to actually be okay myself. And he knew. Kids know. He came to me one night and said, 'Dad, are you sad?' Just like that. I said, 'Sometimes.' He said, 'Me too. But I think we're going to be all right.' He was 6. Madison was still. "He said that?" "He said that." Logan looked at the concrete bench, at the faint grain of it. "I cried in the bathroom afterward for about 20 minutes, and then I came out and made dinner and something had shifted. Not fixed. Just moved." She looked at him for a long moment. "He sounds remarkable." "He's a strange, serious frog notebook kid who worries about oak trees and teaches himself things from library books." Logan smiled. Not the polished kind, but the real kind, the kind with a small ache behind it. "He's the best thing I've ever done. I just hope I'm doing right by him." "You are," she said. "You don't know that. I've seen you two together 3 times, and I know that." She said it with the directness that was so particular to her, the kind that didn't allow for arguing because it wasn't an opinion dressed up as a fact. It just was a fact. "You don't look at him like he's a responsibility. You look at him like he's a person." Logan turned that over. "Most people do," he said. "No," she said. "They don't." Noah started asking about her. Not obviously, not in the way that children asked about things when they wanted something, with the transparency of a window. He asked the way Noah asked about everything, at unexpected angles, with the careful patience of a person doing research. "Does Mara have a dog?" he asked one evening at dinner. They'd been eating soup, and Noah had been reading the frog notebook at the table, which Logan had told him twice not to do, and he'd looked up seemingly at random and asked the question. "She doesn't. She thought about it, but decided she couldn't take care of one right now." Noah processed this. "That's responsible." "Yeah." "Does she like soup?" "I don't know. I haven't made her soup." "You should make her soup." He went back to the notebook. "People who don't have anyone to make them soup are cold." Logan put his spoon down. What does that mean?" "Mrs. Gallagher told me that." Noah turned a page. She said when she was young, her mother said that being loved is just people making sure you're not cold. He looked up. I think Mara might be cold. Logan sat with that for a moment. When did you get so... I'm 8, Noah said, not 5. Right. He made her soup the following Saturday. She came to the apartment for the first time. She'd asked to see it, and he'd said yes before thinking about it, which was its own kind of answer. The apartment was what it was, a 2-bedroom in Pilsen with good natural light, and a kitchen that was too small, and a living room with a couch that had survived 4 years of Logan and Noah and showed every day of it. He'd cleaned, not frantically, but honestly, the kind of cleaning that tidies without erasing evidence that people live there. She walked in and looked around the way she looked at things, carefully taking it in. This is a real apartment, she said. As opposed to? As opposed to most apartments I've been in, which look like they're waiting for someone to move in. She stopped at the bookshelf, half Logan's, half Noah's, the two halves distinguishable by the heights they could reach. She touched the spine of a field guide to North American trees. His? His. He's got 3 of those. Noah was at school. Logan ladled soup into bowls and they sat at the kitchen table, the small one with 2 chairs and a third one pulled from the living room because he'd bought the table before he'd thought about having 3 people at it. She ate the soup. She didn't say anything about it for a moment. Then, Logan? Yeah. This is really good soup. It's just chicken and vegetable. I know what it is. It's still... She looked at the bowl. I can't remember the last time someone made me food. He looked at her. Nobody cooks for you. I have a food delivery app and a coffee machine that costs more than your truck, probably, and a restaurant downstairs in my building that will send things up. She turned her spoon in the broth. But nobody cooks for me. He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything, and she didn't seem to need him to. She just kept eating, slowly, in the small kitchen with the bad light and the 2 chairs, and there was something in her posture that was different from how she sat in restaurants or on park benches. Something slightly less armored, slightly more present, like she'd taken something off at the door without noticing. It wasn't all easy. None of it was easy, and they both knew that, and the knowing kept it honest. She canceled twice in the first month of March. Once for a board crisis, once for a product failure that pulled her in at 6 in the morning and didn't let go until midnight. The second time, she texted him at 11:45 p.m. I know I said Saturday. I'm sorry. It's been a day. He'd replied, I know. It's fine. And then, after a moment, it's not nothing, though. She'd read that and sat with it and hadn't replied until morning, and when she did, it was, no. It's not nothing. I hear you. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected either defensiveness. She had plenty of people who'd try to make her feel guilty for her schedule, and she'd built a specific immunity to it, or dismissal. He'd gotten neither. He'd gotten her actually taking the thing he said seriously, which was harder than either of the other options. There was a Thursday in late March where they argued, not a fight with edges, but an argument with weight behind it, the kind that comes from 2 people saying honest things that don't align. They were walking through Douglas Park in the late afternoon, the air cool enough that they were both moving faster than a stroll, and she'd been talking about a decision she'd made, restructuring a department in a way that had cut 7 positions. She'd walked him through the logic of it, the reasons, the necessity of it, the alternatives she'd exhausted. She was good at explaining the logic. The logic was sound. But how were the people? Logan asked. She looked at him. The 7 people, he said. How were they? They were given severance, fair severance, better than industry standard. That's not what I asked. She stopped walking. I know what you asked. So? She looked at the park, at the bare grass, at a pair of geese making their aggressive way across the path. 2 of them cried in the meeting, she said after a moment. One of them had been there since the beginning, 5 years. She didn't cry, she just said, I thought we were building something together, and I told her we were and that this was part of it, which was true and also not enough. She paused. I knew it wasn't enough. I did it anyway. He didn't say anything. I know how that sounds, she said. I'm not judging you. You're quiet in a way that feels like judging. I'm quiet because I don't know what to say. I run a site crew. When I have to let someone go, it's personal. I can see them the next day at the same coffee cart. He looked at her. You operate at a scale where you can't do that, and I don't know how you carry it. Sometimes I don't, she said. Sometimes I just move to the next thing and hope the carrying catches up later when I have room for it. Does it? She started walking again, usually at 3 in the morning. He fell into step beside her. The geese had claimed a section of path and were showing no signs of negotiating. They went around them. I'm not good at this, she said. At what? Being... She searched for the word. Being seen. By someone who's paying attention. She looked at him sideways. Most people who know me know the version I manage. You just look at me and say things like, how were the people, and I don't have a managed version for that. I know. It's uncomfortable. I know that too. She walked for a moment, then, don't stop doing it. He looked at her. Don't stop asking the real questions, she said. Even when I don't answer them well, She stopped searching for language. It matters. He nodded. Around them, the park was moving through that late afternoon light that made everything look like a photograph of itself. Slightly too vivid, slightly too still. A kid on a bicycle went past. A woman on a bench was reading with the intense focus of someone actively not thinking about something. Madison pulled her coat tighter and kept walking, and Logan walked beside her, close enough that their arms occasionally touched, neither of them moving to close the distance entirely, and neither of them moving away. Noah told her about Claire. Logan hadn't planned for it. He'd brought Noah to the park one Saturday in late March. Not a scheduled thing, just a day when the weather had made staying inside feel punishing. And Madison had been there, and the three of them had walked, Noah between them, talking about something from school with the unspooling intensity he brought to subjects that interested him. Then, without particular transition, Noah said, My mom died when I was 4. Madison looked down at him. She didn't flinch, didn't over-soften, didn't make the careful face adults made when they were preparing to handle something delicately. She said, I know, your dad told me. She was pretty, Noah said. I know that from pictures. I don't remember her face, but I remember her voice a little. It was low. He considered, like a radio. That's a beautiful way to remember someone, Madison said. Dad keeps a picture on his nightstand. He thinks I don't know, but I do. He looked up at her. Do you have pictures of people you miss? I have one, she said. Of my mother. She had the same hair as me. Noah thought about this. It's weird when they're gone, he said. You still think about telling them things. Like, I'll learn something, and then I think I should tell Mom, and then I remember. He paused. Does that go away? She didn't tell him yes. She didn't tell him no. She said, I think you just get better at holding both things at once, the knowing and the wishing. Noah seemed to find this acceptable. He went back to looking at the oak tree they were approaching, checking its bark the way he always did. His particular Sunday inspection that Logan had long since stopped trying to explain to other people. Logan hadn't said anything through any of this. He'd walked and listened and felt something moving through him that he didn't have a name for. Some compound feeling made of grief and gratitude and the slow, uncertain warmth of something he'd been afraid to look at directly. He looked at it now. Madison was crouching down to where Noah was examining a knot in the oak's bark, genuinely curious, asking him what he was looking for. Noah was explaining. The tree stood above them, enormous and patient, its roots spreading somewhere out of sight beneath the hard ground. Logan stood back. He thought about walls and what they cost to keep standing, about the 14 months before the restaurant and the ironed shirt and the woman who'd told him she was Mara and had been something more complicated and more real. He thought about the way some things come to you sideways, not announced, not prepared for, just present one day in a hardware store aisle with the fluorescent lights making everything plain. He thought about good bones. He watched Madison and his son under the old oak tree, and the city moved around them in its ordinary way, indifferent and alive. And Logan Reed stood very still in the March cold and understood, without deciding to understand it, that something had already changed, that the wall had a door in it now, that the door had been open for some time, that he was only just now willing to admit he'd been standing beside it, The promise happened on a Wednesday. It wasn't planned as a promise, that was the thing. It started as a simple afternoon, the kind that accumulates meaning only in retrospect. Madison had come to the park on a day that wasn't Saturday, which had become its own kind of signal between them. The midweek appearances that meant she was choosing this over something else without making a production of it. Noah had a half day from school, and Logan had taken the afternoon off. A rare thing, the kind of thing his foreman Marcus had noted with raised eyebrows and no comment, which for Marcus was practically a speech. The three of them were under the oak tree. Noah had a permission slip from his teacher to do a field observation of the tree for a school science project, which meant he had his composition book and a ruler and was measuring things with the gravity of a man filing an important document. Madison was reading something on her phone. Not working, actually reading. A thing Logan had noticed she did rarely, and with visible pleasure when she allowed herself to. Logan was watching a pair of crows argue in the upper branches. Noah looked up from his composition book. "The school art show is April 19th, he said. It was the way he delivered information, not asking, just placing it in the room, waiting to see what people did with it. "Yeah," Logan said. "We talked about it. Mrs. Heller says we can invite people." Noah looked at Madison with the careful neutrality of a child who has decided what they want but is too smart to ask for it directly. "It's on a Friday night, 7 o'clock. They have cookies." Madison looked up from her phone. "What kind of cookies?" she said. "The kind from a package," Noah said. "But still." She looked at him for a moment, then at Logan, then back at the boy. "April 19th, she said. 7 o'clock, he confirmed. "I'll be there." She said it simply, the way she said things she meant, without inflation, without performance. "What's your piece?" Noah allowed himself a small look of satisfaction at the outcome of this negotiation. "It's a painting. Of the tree. But I painted the roots too, the part underground, because I think the most important part is what you can't see." Madison was quiet for a moment. "That's going to be the best piece in the show." "Probably," Noah agreed and went back to his measurements. Logan caught her eye over the top of Noah's head. She gave him a look that said nothing specific and everything general, the look of someone who had just agreed to something they were glad to have agreed to. He should have known then that it would cost something. The things that matter always do. April came in warm and then turned difficult in a different way. Not with weather, but with the specific friction of two lives that were built separately, trying to find room for each other. Madison's schedule was not a thing that bent easily. It was a structure built over years, reinforced by necessity and by her own particular brand of discipline. And even with intention, it resisted adjustment. She was better at being present on the margins. The Saturdays, the Wednesday lunches, the occasional evening that snuck through her calendar like a gap in a fence, than she was at restructuring the center. Logan understood this intellectually. He understood it less well at 10 at night when he'd made plans that fell through, or when he texted and got a two-word response that he knew meant she was in something she couldn't leave. He was not a man who needed constant attention. 4 years of being the only adult in the house had cured him of that. But he was a man who needed honesty, and sometimes the honesty arrived late and bruised and wrapped in apologies that she delivered with the stiffness of someone who didn't apologize often and hadn't gotten good at it. "You don't have to say sorry like it's a report," he told her once. "How do I say it?" "Like you mean it, and not like you're presenting findings." She looked at him. "That's the only way I know how to do things." "I know. I'm not asking you to change, I'm just telling you what I hear." She was quiet. Then, "What do you hear?" "Someone who's practiced at solving problems and less practiced at just being wrong." He said it without cruelty. "The apology sounds like a solution. Sometimes it doesn't need to be a solution, it just needs to be a sorry." She looked at the floor, then at him. "I'm sorry," she said, differently this time. Smaller, real. He nodded. That one worked. These were the conversations that happened between the park visits and the soup and the Saturday mornings. The ones that didn't get easier but got more honest, which was its own kind of progress. The board call came on a Monday in the second week of April, and it changed everything before anyone in the room fully understood what was happening. Madison was in her office at 7 a.m. She was always in her office at 7 a.m., a habit so ingrained it had stopped feeling like a choice. When her COO, A precise and humorless man named Griffin Hale appeared in her doorway with a tablet and an expression that meant numbers were bad. "The Meridian Group pulled their term sheet," he said. She looked up. "When?" "Friday evening. Their legal sent the notice after close. I've been running scenarios since Saturday." He stepped into the office and set the tablet on her desk. "We're not in danger, but the Series D timeline moves up 6 months, and the Singapore deal becomes critical. Not important. Critical." The Singapore deal was a contract with a regional logistics conglomerate called Heron Pacific, one of the largest in Southeast Asia, to license Solvara's enterprise platform across their entire operation. $240 million over 7 years. It had been in negotiation for 8 months. It was close, but close in the way that large international deals were close, which meant it could fall apart on a bad Tuesday over something no one had anticipated. "What do they need?" Madison asked. "A face-to-face. Their board doesn't do final approvals on video calls. It's a policy, apparently, a cultural thing. They want a principal, not a proxy." Griffin turned the tablet toward her. "The window is April 18th to 22nd. Their chairman is in Singapore that week. After that, he's traveling for a month and the deal goes cold." Madison looked at the dates on the screen. April 18th to 22nd. She looked at them for a long enough moment that Griffin said, "Madison, I hear you. This is $240 million. I know what it is." He was quiet. Griffin was not a man who did well with quiet. "I can prepare a delegation. Take Chen from business development, someone from legal. But they'll want a principal. The chairman knows your name. He requested you specifically." "I know." She turned the tablet back toward him. "Give me 24 hours. He looked at her with the expression of a man who wanted very much to say something and was exercising the professional discipline not to. He took the tablet and left. Madison turned her chair toward the window. The lake was gray and enormous and entirely indifferent to her problems, which was the thing she had always liked about it. She sat with the view for a while, running the numbers she already knew. The Meridian pullout was manageable. She'd told the truth about that. Their runway was solid. But the optics of it would reach investors before she could manage the narrative, and the Singapore deal closing would neutralize the damage almost completely. Without it, the next 6 months would require a different kind of focus, a defensive posture she hated, explaining and reassuring instead of building. $240 million. April 19th, 7 o'clock. Cookies from a package. The most important part is what you can't see. She picked up her phone and called Logan. But he was on a site on the near west side when she called, standing on the 4th floor of a building that didn't have a 4th floor yet, technically, just rebar and concrete decking and the open sky where the ceiling would eventually be. He stepped away from the crew and answered. "Hey." He could hear something in her voice before she said anything else. "I have a problem," she said. She told him about it directly, the way she told him things. The Meridian pullout, the Singapore deal, the window. She gave him the facts first, then the dates. He was quiet for a moment after she finished. "April 19th, he said. "Yes." Another silence. Below him the crew was working, the sounds of construction filling the open floor, and he moved to the edge where it was louder and then past it, toward a corner where the sound dropped. "You told him you'd be there," he said. "I know." "He's been talking about it for 2 weeks, Madison." "I know that too." Her voice was controlled, but not in the managed way. In the way of someone holding something in. "I'm not calling you to be told what I already know. I'm calling because I don't know what to do." He leaned against a concrete column. A pigeon landed 3 feet away and looked at him with the blank confidence of an animal that knew no one was going to do anything about it. "What do you want me to say?" he asked. "I want you to tell me it's fine, that he won't remember, that it's one night. Is that what you believe?" "No." A pause. "But I want to hear it anyway." "I can't tell you it's fine," Logan said. "He's 8, and he's going to be looking for you. And when you're not there, he's going to find a way to decide it's okay because he's learned to find ways to decide things are okay. And that breaks my heart a little, just being honest." She didn't say anything. "But I also can't tell you the deal doesn't matter," he said. "I know it matters. I know it's not a simple thing. It's $240 million and the livelihoods of 400 people who work for me." Her voice went quieter. Those aren't abstractions, that's real. I know it's real. Then what do I do? He looked out at the open sky above the unfinished building, at the gray Chicago ceiling of it. I can't make this decision for you, he said, and I don't think you actually want me to. Another pause. Longer. No, she said, I don't. But I need you to hear something. Okay. This isn't going to be the last time, he said. If this works, you and me and Noah, this is going to keep happening. The deal, the call, the thing that needs you to be somewhere else. And I'm not saying you can never choose the work. That's not who you are, and I don't want a version of you that isn't who you are. He paused. But there's going to have to be a line, not a rule I set, a line you know. And I need to know you know where it is. The sight sounds drifted back toward him. A drill, a radio, someone calling something across the floor. I hear you, she said. I know you do. He looked at the pigeon, who had not moved. Whatever you decide, you need to decide it because it's what you believe, not because I said something and you felt guilty. Logan. Yeah. This is hard. I know. I hate that it's hard. That's how you know it matters. She exhaled. He heard her turn in her chair. I'll call you tomorrow, she said. Okay. She hung up. He stood on the open fourth floor in the wind and looked at the city sprawling out below him, the streets and rooftops, and the pale shapes of buildings going up and coming down, the whole unresting thing of it. That night was bad. He made dinner and helped Noah with homework and listened to 20 minutes about a documentary on mycorrhizal networks, the underground fungal systems that connect tree root systems, which Noah had been researching with the intensity he brought to things that confirmed his existing beliefs. And he did all of this while carrying the weight of the conversation in his chest and not putting it down. After Noah was asleep, Logan sat in the kitchen. He didn't talk to Claire that night, the way he sometimes did. He just sat. He was afraid. He knew he was afraid, and he knew what he was afraid of, which was the specific and familiar terror of having let someone in far enough that their choices could hurt him. He had been careful about this for 4 years. Not consciously, not with rules, but with the organic caution of a man who had learned through loss what exposure cost. And then Madison Hart had been at the next table at a restaurant in the snow, and she had said, I'm going to eat anyway. And somehow that had been enough. He picked up his coffee cup and it was empty, and he didn't get up to refill it. What he wanted, what he could admit in the kitchen at 11 at night in a way he couldn't admit anywhere else, was for her to stay. Not because the deal didn't matter. Not because her work wasn't real and important and genuinely worth something in the world. But because he had watched Noah talk about the art show for 2 weeks and had watched his son's face when she confirmed she'd be there. And that face was a specific and particular thing that once you'd seen it, you couldn't unsee. He was afraid that the line he'd described on the phone, the line she needed to find for herself, didn't exist yet. That it was something she would need to build, the way you build anything real, slowly and imperfectly. And with the understanding that the first version probably wouldn't hold. He was afraid that they didn't have time to build it before April 19th. He sat in the kitchen until midnight, then went to bed. The next day, she didn't call until 6 in the evening. He was finishing a site report when the phone rang, and he answered without saying hello. I've been in my office since 7 this morning, she said. I've been running every version of this. And? The deal needs a principal. That's real. Griffin can prepare the delegation, and Chen is capable, but Heron's chairman, his name is Leonard Yo, he made a request for me specifically. I have a relationship with him, 2 years of emails and video calls. He trusts me. She stopped. And I've been thinking about what that means, that he trusts me because I've always shown up, and Noah trusts me because I said I'd show up. Logan didn't say anything. I keep thinking about how I'm good at showing up for things I'm afraid of losing, she said. Deals, investors, board meetings. I show up to those because the consequence of not showing up is clear and immediate, and I can measure it. Her voice changed slightly, not breaking, but going somewhere more unguarded. The consequence of not showing up for a child is harder to measure. It's slower. You don't see it in the numbers. No, he said, you don't. I need to tell you something. Okay. I have been the person who chose the work every single time, she said, for 10 years. Every time there was something that required me to choose, I chose the work. And I told myself it was necessary, and I believed it because it always was necessary. There was always a reason. She paused. And I am sitting here tonight trying to figure out if this is different or if I'm just telling myself it's different because I want it to be. Logan set down the site report. Is it different? A long pause. Yes, she said, but I don't fully know how to be the person who chooses differently yet. I don't have that. I don't have the muscle for it. I've never had to build it. I know, he said. You're not angry. I'm scared, he said. It came out plainly, with no decoration. I'm scared because I care about you and he cares about you, and that's exposed in a way that I haven't been in a long time. But angry isn't the right word. She was silent for a moment. I haven't made the decision yet, she said. I know. You'll tell me when you have. What if I make the wrong one? He thought about it honestly. Then we figure out what that means, he said. But I think you already know what you're going to decide. I think you've known for 24 hours. I think you called me tonight because you needed to say it out loud before you could do it. A long silence, then quietly, yeah. Okay, he said. Logan. Yeah. I'm going to need to learn how to do this. I know. I might be bad at it. Probably, he said, but you're usually pretty good at things you decide to get good at. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a cry and was the most unguarded thing he'd ever heard from her. That's the nicest thing you've said to me. I've said a lot of nice things. You've said true things. This one was nice. He leaned back in his chair. Through the window, the Pilsen Street was doing its ordinary evening thing. A kid on a bike, a woman with groceries, the diner on the corner putting its sign on. The ordinary, unremarkable persistence of a neighborhood living its life. Get some sleep, he said. You too. He hung up and sat for a moment, holding the phone. He thought about the building under construction, the open fourth floor, the unfinished ceiling above him, the way a structure looked terrifying at the stage where it was halfway done. Before the walls came in and before the roof closed over. When it was just bones and air and the not yet. That was where they were, the three of them. Bones and air and the not yet. He put the phone down and went to check on Noah, who was asleep with the frog composition book open on his chest, a pencil still in his hand, a half-finished diagram of something root-shaped spreading across the open page. Logan set the book on the nightstand. He turned off the light. In the dark hallway, he stood still for a moment, listening to the apartment breathe around him, and understood that whatever happened in the next week was going to tell him something he needed to know. Not about her work, not about the deal, not about $240 million and what it cost to build something from the ground up, about what she was willing to protect, about where the line was, about whether what they were building together had the kind of bones that held. She made the decision at 2 a.m, not with drama, not with a moment of sudden clarity or a sign from the universe or any of the things that were supposed to accompany the kinds of decisions that changed your life. She made it the way she made most hard decisions, alone, at her desk, with a cold cup of coffee and 3 open documents on her screen, and the city dark and silent outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. She had been running the numbers again. Not the deal numbers, those she knew by heart, but the other kind. The kind that didn't go in spreadsheets, the kind that were harder to quantify and easier to get wrong. She thought about Noah's face when she'd said, "I'll be there," the small satisfaction in it, the way he'd gone back to his measurements without needing to ask again, because the answer was enough and he trusted it. She thought about Logan on the phone the night before. "I'm scared," said in the flat, honest way he said things that cost him, without covering it in anything. She thought about the 7 people from the restructured department, the woman who'd said, "I thought we were building something together." She thought about her mother, 14 hours a day in broken systems, coming home saying, "I don't understand why it has to be this hard." She closed the Singapore documents. She opened a new email and started writing to Griffin. By 6 a.m., she had drafted the memo, revised it twice, and sent it. By 7 a.m., Griffin had replied with 3 questions and 1 statement. The statement was, This is a significant risk. She replied, I know. Prepare Chen. I'll brief him personally today. By 8 a.m., she was in the Solvera conference room with David Chen, her head of business development, a careful and thorough man of 40 who had been with the company for 3 years and who she trusted precisely because he didn't oversell himself. She walked him through the Heron file for 2 hours. Not just the numbers, not just the contract points, but the relationship. Leonard Yo's priorities, his communication style, the things he'd said in meetings that weren't in any document but that mattered for the room. She gave Chen everything she had. You've built this for 2 years, Chen said when she'd finished. Yeo asked for you. I know. If I go in my capacity and we don't close, then we don't close, she said. And we manage from there. But you're going to close it, David, because you know this deal as well as I do, and because Leonard Yo is a practical man, and what he wants is a trustworthy counterpart who understands his operation. You can be that. She looked at him. I need you to believe that before you walk in that room. He was quiet for a moment. Do you believe it? I wouldn't be sending you if I didn't. He looked at the file on the table between them, at the months of work in it. Can I ask why? You can. A pause. Why? She looked at the conference room window, at the city outside it. Because I have somewhere else I need to be, she said. He nodded slowly, in the way of a man who understood that not all the information was on the table and was deciding to accept that. He picked up the file. I'll call you from Singapore. Call me before and after every major meeting. I'll be available. He stood. Madison. Yeah. I hope it's worth it. She looked at him. Me too. Griffin found her in the hallway at 10:30. He didn't say anything immediately. He walked beside her toward her office with the contained energy of a man who had prepared an argument and was organizing the best entry point for it. Say it, she said. The board is going to hear about this. I know. Meridian already pulled. If Singapore doesn't close, we're going to have a Q3 story that's very hard to tell. I'm aware of Q3, Griffin. Are you aware that 2 of our major investors have a call scheduled next week, and that the Singapore deal was specifically named as a stabilizing factor in the last earnings? Yes. She stopped walking and turned to face him. I know all of it. I made the decision knowing all of it. Chen is capable, and the file is complete, and the relationship is solid enough to survive a different face in the room. She held his gaze. This is the decision. You can disagree with it. I do disagree with it. Noted. She started walking again. Keep preparing for the board call. Have the contingency scenarios ready by Thursday. He stayed where he was. What's on the 19th that's worth $240 million? She didn't turn around. A promise. She heard him exhale behind her, the particular exhale of a man who had run out of professional leverage and knew it. She kept walking. She didn't tell Logan right away. Not because she wanted to be mysterious about it, but because she was superstitious in the specific way that people who don't believe in superstition sometimes are, a low-grade feeling that naming it too early would disturb something. She told herself she would tell him on Saturday, at the park, the normal way. But Friday came first. She was leaving the office at 9, early for her, when her phone showed a text from a number she didn't recognize. It took her a second to realize it was from Noah's school. Then she remembered she'd given her number to Logan for emergency contacts, weeks ago, almost as a practical matter, and he'd apparently passed it to the school. The text was from Logan. Mrs. Heller gave Noah a C on the tree painting. He's not upset. He's furious. The scientific kind of furious. He says she doesn't understand root systems. Thought you should know for context before Saturday. She stood at the elevator and read this twice. Then she replied, Is he okay? Logan. He's fine. Currently writing a letter to Mrs. Heller explaining the cambium layer. I've been asked not to interfere. Madison. That seems wise. Logan. He asked if you'd look at it before he sends it. The letter. She looked at this for a moment. Madison. Tell him yes. She rode down in the elevator, smiling at her phone, which was not a thing she typically did in elevators. And when the doors opened into the lobby, the security guard on the night desk gave her a slightly surprised look, because in 3 years he had not seen her look like that leaving the building. Saturday morning. Logan was at Ferris's cart when she arrived, already holding 2 cups, which had become their arrangement. Whoever arrived first bought both, an economy of gesture that had stopped needing discussion. She was wearing the navy coat again. The weather had warmed enough that the heavy cashmere was unnecessary, and he had noticed that she wore the practical coats when she was coming to be somewhere, not to be seen. He handed her the cup. "I sent Chen to Singapore," she said. He looked at her. "I drafted the memo Wednesday night. He flew out yesterday morning." She wrapped her hands around the cup. "He's good. The file is complete. There's a real chance he closes it. And if he doesn't? Then I manage a difficult Q3 and have some hard conversations with the board." She looked at the oak tree. "It's manageable. I've managed worse." He was quiet for a moment. "When did you decide?" 2 in the morning, Thursday." She glanced at him. "I told you I'd call when I decided." "You didn't call." "No." She looked at the lake, visible at the end of the park path, gray and bright at the same time. "I needed a day to make sure I'd decided it and not just said it." She turned to look at him directly. "There's a difference. I know there is. I wanted to be sure it was real before I told you." She held his gaze. "It's real." He didn't say anything. He didn't make a thing of it, didn't perform relief or gratitude, which she appreciated because she would have found both embarrassing. He just nodded in the quiet way he had, and they stood together under the tree and drank their coffee. After a while, he said, "Noah has a letter he wants you to review. About the cambium layer. It's 3 pages. Of course it is. He cited 2 sources. Good." She looked at the tree. Mrs. Heller should have done her research. Potent. The week between the decision and the art show was its own kind of thing. Madison was still in the office by 7 every morning. She was still on calls until 8 some evenings. The work didn't pause, and she didn't expect it to. The decision she'd made wasn't about leaving the work, it was about where the line was, and knowing that made the work easier to be inside without losing herself in it. She called Chen twice a day. She prepared Griffin's board scenarios. She did the things that needed doing, but on Tuesday she met Logan at the school for a curriculum night that she hadn't been asked to attend, and that she attended anyway, sitting beside him in a small chair designed for someone 2 feet shorter while Noah's teacher talked about end-of-year projects. On Thursday, she reviewed Noah's letter to Mrs. Heller, which was exactly 3 pages and cited a university botany paper and a field guide that Logan recognized as the one from the apartment bookshelf. She suggested one revision, a sentence that was technically correct but would read as condescending, and Noah accepted the edit with the dignity of a writer who trusted his editor. "It's a very good letter," she told him. "I know," he said, "but it's important to say things clearly." "Yes," she said. "It is." He looked at her with the serious attention he turned on things he found genuinely interesting. "Are you coming to the show?" I said I was. People say things. The way he said it, flat, matter-of-fact, without self-pity, hit her somewhere low and specific. She thought about what Logan had told her. He's learned to find ways to decide things are okay. She thought about what that cost, over time, for a child. The calibration required to protect yourself from ordinary disappointment. "Noah," she said. "Yeah. I'm going to be there. Not because I said it, because I want to be." He looked at her for a long moment with those serious eyes. Then he said, "Okay," and went back to the letter. It was not a big moment, but it was a real one, and real was what counted. April 19th. Logan had taken the afternoon off, for the 2nd time in the same month, and Marcus had made the same eyebrow comment and received the same non-response. He picked Noah up from school at 3 and drove home, and Noah changed out of his uniform in approximately 90 seconds, and then spent 40 minutes deciding whether to wear the blue sweater or the gray one. Logan, who had learned not to rush this process, made sandwiches and waited. "Blue," Noah finally said. "Good choice. It's more serious." "The gray one isn't serious?" "The gray one is comfortable. The blue one says I mean it." Logan looked at his son. "You're 8. "I know." They ate the sandwiches. Noah reviewed the framed painting in his mind. Logan could tell by the way his eyes went to the middle distance and tracked something, running some internal final check on the work the way an engineer might review a set of plans before a presentation. Is the root part visible enough? Noah asked. I've seen it, Noah. It's visible. Mrs. Heller said the underground part was creative but unclear. Mrs. Heller was wrong. Noah accepted this. He ate the rest of his sandwich. At 5:30 he was ready to go, which meant Logan had an hour and a half to fill, so they drove slowly and stopped for gas and parked 6 blocks from the school and walked. Madison met them outside. She was there before they were, standing on the sidewalk in front of the school's main entrance in a jacket the color of dark green that Logan hadn't seen before. Her hair down, no phone in her hand. She was just standing there waiting, the way you waited when you decided to be somewhere and there was nowhere else to be. Noah saw her from half a block away. Logan felt him slow and then stop, and then when she raised a hand in a small wave, watched his son's face do something complicated, something that moved through surprise and then something harder to name, something that lived in the space between hoping and receiving. He walked up to her. "You're early," he said. "I didn't want to be late." He considered this. Smart. She looked down at him. Blue sweater. "It says I mean it." "It does." She looked at Logan over Noah's head. He looked back at her. There was too much in that look to break down into parts. "Okay," Noah said. "Let's go in." The show was in the school gymnasium, which had been transformed with the ambitious optimism of elementary school art departments everywhere. White paper hung on cafeteria tables, track lighting borrowed from the drama department aimed at the better pieces, a cookie table at the entrance manned by 2 parents with the gravity of people handling something important. The paintings were arranged by class along the far wall. Noah's was at the end of the 3rd row. It was 18 inches by 24, painted in acrylics on canvas board, and it showed the oak tree from the park. Not a pretty version, not the postcard version, but the actual tree, gnarled and enormous and rooted with the kind of presence that made you believe it had been there before the city and would be there after it. And beneath the ground line, in dark browns and ochres, and one thin thread of pale gold, the roots spread outward and downward and into each other in a network that was more complex than the tree above it, more tangled, more alive-looking. The most important part is what you can't see. The 3 of them stood in front of it. "Noah," Madison said. "Yeah." "This is extraordinary." He looked at the painting and then at her. She gave it a C. Then she was wrong, which you already knew. Madison crouched slightly to look at the root section more closely. "The way you've done the depth here. The layering. How did you get the gold thread in there?" "I mixed titanium white into the yellow ochre and used a liner brush. The cambium layer is gold. I looked it up." She stood back up. "It's exactly right." He looked at the painting for another moment. Then with the precision of someone checking off a list. "Dad thought it was good too." Dad was right. Logan, who had said nothing since they'd walked up to the painting, put his hand on Noah's shoulder. Noah didn't shrug it off, which he sometimes did in public, with the complex dignity of a child navigating the line between needing comfort and needing to seem like he didn't. He leaned in, just slightly. Logan kept his hand there. Around them the gymnasium filled with parents and siblings and the noise of a school event, other children pulling their people toward their pieces, the sugar smell of packaged cookies, a father laughing too loud at something across the room. Normal noise. The normal texture of a life with other people in it. Later, standing by the cookie table while Noah had been absorbed by 2 classmates who wanted to debate the root network with him, Logan looked at Madison. "Thank you," he said. "You don't have to—" "I know I don't." He looked at her steadily. "Thank you." She held his gaze. "I wanted to be here." "I know. That's why I'm thanking you. Not for showing up, for wanting to." She looked down at her coffee cup. Someone had made real coffee, not the packaged kind, and she'd found it immediately the way she found good coffee anywhere. She turned it in her hands. "How'd the day feel?" he asked. "The choice?" "Terrifying," she said. "All day. I kept waiting to feel certain about it." "Did you?" "No." She looked up. but I kept showing up anyway. That's different from certain. Yeah, he said. It is. It's actually better. She looked at him. Certain is easy, he said. You just stand there. Showing up when you're not certain, that takes something. She absorbed that. Chen called this afternoon, she said. First meeting with Yo went well. He thinks they're close. Good. It might be okay. It might be. And if it's not, you'll manage, he said. You said that. I will. She said it with the flat confidence that wasn't performance but habit. The genuine article. The version built from doing hard things over years. Then, more quietly, I just needed to know I could choose something different. Across the gymnasium, Noah had taken both classmates to stand in front of the painting and appeared to be delivering a presentation. His hands moved. His face was lit. Logan watched his son. He thought about the night he'd sat in the kitchen and understood that the door had been open for a while and that he'd been standing beside it. He thought about the oak tree in the park, the cambium layer underneath, the way the most important structures were the ones no one could see from the outside. He thought about what it meant, genuinely meant, for someone to show up not because they had to, but because they decided that what was here was worth protecting. He looked at Madison. She was watching Noah too, with the expression she got sometimes when she thought no one was looking. Something open and quiet and slightly undone, like a person who hadn't expected to feel what they were feeling and was still catching up to it. Hey, he said. She looked at him. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. The look between them covered what words would have made clumsy, the particular understanding that existed between two people who have told each other the hard, true things and have found the other person still standing there afterward. She moved half a step closer. He didn't move away. They stood like that together, in the bright noise of the gymnasium, while Noah held court at the end of the third row, beneath the painting of the tree and its hidden roots, the gold thread of the cambium layer catching the track light and glowing in a way that Mrs. Heller had apparently not been able to see. But they could. Chen closed the deal. The call came on a Thursday morning, 10 days after the art show, while Madison was in the middle of a budget review and Griffin was standing at the whiteboard with a marker and the particular expression of a man who had been preparing for bad news and had not yet recalibrated. Her phone buzzed on the table. She looked at it. Chen's name. She picked it up. Tell me. We're done, Chen said. He sounded tired and steady and quietly proud, the way people sounded when they'd carried something heavy a long distance and set it down carefully. Yo signed this morning, full term, 7-year commitment, the licensing structure we wanted. He sent his regards and said, a brief pause like he was checking notes. He said that the quality of your team reflects the quality of your leadership and that he looks forward to a long relationship. She was quiet for 3 seconds. Griffin had stopped writing on the whiteboard. Good work, David, she said. Come home. She set the phone down. Griffin looked at her. He had the expression of a man revising several things at once. His risk assessment, his opinion of Chen, and possibly his opinion of Madison's judgment, though that last one he would never say out loud. 240 million, he said. 7 years. She picked up her pen. Where were we? Madison? The budget review, Griffin. Where were we? He looked at her for a moment. Then he turned back to the whiteboard. Line item 7, he said. Infrastructure costs. They went back to work. Later, after the review, after the board notification, after the calls that needed to be made and the emails that needed to go out, she sat in her office alone for 20 minutes and did something she rarely allowed herself. She let the feeling land. Not the deal, not the numbers, not the validation of a decision that had terrified her for 10 days. She let herself feel the whole shape of the last 3 months, from the restaurant in the snow to this desk on a Thursday morning, and she thought about all the versions of herself that had gotten her here, the driven ones, the armored ones, the one who had given Brendan a fake name to share with a stranger and then sat in a hardware store aisle and been found out under fluorescent lights, and somehow found that to be a relief. She thought about the penthouse with the breakfast nook without chairs. She thought about soup. She picked up her phone and texted Logan. Deal closed. Chen did it. His reply came in 4 minutes. I knew he would. You trained him well. Then, after a moment, Noah wants to celebrate. He says ice cream is appropriate for professional victories. She looked at this and felt something move through her that she was getting better at not overthinking. A warmth that was uncomplicated and real, and that she'd spent most of her adult life being too busy to notice when it arrived. Tell him I agree, she wrote back. Saturday. Chat. The treehouse idea came from nowhere, the way the best ideas did. They were in the park on a Saturday in early May. The three of them, and the city had finally decided it was spring. Genuinely, not provisionally. The light was different, the way light changed when it was coming through actual leaves instead of bare branches, filtered and green and moving. Ferris had switched from the Cuban trumpet music to something softer, a Spanish guitar that drifted across the park and made even the joggers slow down slightly without realizing it. Noah was sitting at the base of the oak tree with his back against the bark, reading. He'd discovered a book about arboreal ecosystems at the library the previous week, and had been working through it with the systematic devotion he brought to things that confirmed his worldview. Logan and Madison were on the bench nearby, close enough that their shoulders touched without either of them arranging for it to happen. They'd been sitting quietly for a while, the comfortable kind of quiet, the kind you could only sustain with someone you'd stopped performing for. Then Noah looked up from his book and said, to no one in particular, the city has a community improvement program for parks. Logan looked at him. Where'd you hear that? Mrs. Gallagher's son works for the parks department. He told her, and she told me. He turned a page. They give permits for structures, community structures, if a neighborhood group applies. Logan was quiet for a moment. What kind of structures? Benches, planting beds. Noah paused, with the timing of a child who had been building towards something. Tree houses. The words sat in the air. Madison looked at Logan. Logan looked at the oak tree. You've been planning this, Logan said. I've been researching it, Noah said. There's a difference. What's the difference? Planning is when you know you're doing it. Researching is when you're finding out if you should. He closed the book with a finger marking his place. I think we should. Logan looked at the tree, the massive, century-old oak that Noah had been measuring and documenting and worrying over for 2 years. He thought about the city permit process, which he knew professionally and which was not simple. He thought about the engineering of putting a platform in a tree that size, doing it right, doing it safely, doing it in a way that respected the structure of the thing instead of just exploiting it. He thought about the cambium layer. The most important part is what you can't see. It'd be a real project, he said, not a weekend thing, months of planning. The permit process alone could take... I know, Noah said. I've started a timeline. Of course he had. Madison was looking at the tree. Could you do it? She asked Logan. Structurally, without damaging the tree. If we did it right. There are ways to mount a platform in a tree that age without compromising the vascular tissue. You use bolts, not nails, specific hardware designed for it. The load distribution needs to account for the limb structure. He was thinking out loud now, the way he thought when a problem started to interest him, his hands slightly restless. We'd need an arborist to assess first. The city's going to want a structural report with the permit application anyway. I know an arborist, Madison said. Both Logan and Noah looked at her. One of our clients runs a landscape architecture firm. They have a certified arborist on staff. I can make a call. Noah looked at his father. His expression was that of a chess player who had placed a piece and was waiting to see if the opponent understood the position. Logan looked at the tree. He looked at his son. He looked at Madison. Start the timeline, Sekam, he said to Noah. A real one, with dates. Noah opened his book again to a blank page in the back and uncapped his pencil. It was that simple and that complicated, the way all things worth doing were. The permit process took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of forms and site assessments and a structural report prepared by a firm whose principal owed Madison a favor and delivered the report 3 weeks faster than standard. 6 weeks of Logan drafting load calculations at the kitchen table after Noah was asleep, the plans spreading across the surface, his coffee going cold at the edge of a blueprint. 6 weeks of Madison navigating the Parks Department bureaucracy with the particular efficiency of a woman who had dealt with municipal systems in 14 cities and knew which calls to make and in what order. Noah tracked it in the Frog notebook. He made a chart. He updated it every Friday with the information Logan brought home, marking each approval and pending item with the seriousness of a project manager who had other things writing on this. There were complications, because there are always complications. The Parks Department's structural reviewer had concerns about the route radius. They didn't want ground disturbance within 12 feet of the trunk base, which required redesigning the access ladder to approach from the north side. Logan redesigned it on a Tuesday night and had the revised plans back to the reviewer by Thursday morning. There was a community input period because the tree was on shared park land, and 3 neighbors attended the meeting and all 3 were in favor, one of them being Eddie from next door who had taught Noah chess, and who said at the meeting, with simple certainty, "That boy has been taking care of that tree since he was 6. I'd rather he build a house in it than see the city put a bench under it." The permit came through on a Wednesday in late June. Noah was at school. Logan got the email at 9 a.m. and sat with it for a moment before forwarding it to Madison and texting Noah's school so they could tell him at lunch. They'd arranged this in advance because Noah had requested to be told as soon as possible and had provided the school office number as a contact point. At 12:15, Noah called from the school office phone. "It came through," he said. "It came through." A pause. Logan could hear the school cafeteria in the background, the ordinary noise of 100 children having lunch. "Okay," Noah said. "I'll see you at 3. "Okay, bud?" "Dad." "Yeah." "Good work." Logan laughed, short and real. "You too." They broke ground on a Saturday in July. That was what Logan called it, broke ground, which was technically inaccurate since the work was elevated, but the phrase was the right one. It was the beginning of a thing, and beginnings deserved their language. He'd brought 2 of his crew from the site, his framer Marcus, who had raised both eyebrows at the project when Logan described it and had then immediately asked what species of lumber they were using, and a younger guy named Teo, who was 24 and good with detail work, and who had said, when Logan told him about the arborist-approved mounting hardware, "That's actually kind of beautiful engineering." He'd paid them for the day out of his own pocket, and they'd both told him he didn't need to, and he'd done it anyway. Madison arrived at 7:30 with coffee for everyone and a canvas bag with sandwiches she'd made herself, badly, with the particular imprecision of someone following a recipe with the focused concentration of a person diffusing a device. The bread was slightly uneven. The fillings were generous to the point of structural instability. They were the best sandwiches anyone ate that day. "You made these," Logan said. "I followed directions." "The directions didn't say this much mustard." "I improvised." Marcus, who had been watching this exchange with the neutral expression of a man who had worked for Logan for 7 years and had strong opinions about many things, turned back to his work without comment, which was his version of approval. Noah was in charge of the materials checklist. He stood at the base of the tree with his clipboard, a real clipboard, purchased specifically for the occasion, and checked off each item as it arrived. The Douglas fir decking, the structural bolts, the railing posts, the hardware kit from the arborist supplier, each piece designed to allow the tree to move and grow without being constrained by the structure around it. "The tree is going to keep growing," Noah told Teo when Teo was reviewing the mounting specification. "So everything has to have room to move. The bolts go in once. You don't add more. You work with what the tree can give you." Teo looked at the kid for a moment. "How old are you?" 8. "Right." He looked back at the bolt. "Okay. Show me where the first one goes." Noah showed him. The work was not fast or dramatic. Real construction wasn't. It was methodical and physical, and full of small problems that required small solutions. The constant negotiation between what you planned and what the material in front of you required. Logan was in the tree for most of the morning, his boots on the bark, his hands on the hardware, talking to Marcus below him in the shorthand of people who had worked together long enough that they didn't need complete sentences. Madison worked the ground crew. She was not a carpenter, but she was organized and strong and absolutely unwilling to stand at the side of something and watch. And she learned fast, and by noon she was cutting decking boards with Teo's circular saw, with a focus that Logan recognized as the same one she brought to board meetings. "You're good at that," he said when she finished a cut. "I'm adequate at it. You just made a perfectly square cut on the first try. I measured 4 times. That's how you do it." She looked at the cut board with the satisfaction of someone who had done a thing with their hands and found the result verifiable in a way that spreadsheets were not. "I see why you like this," she said. "What do you mean?" "At the end of the day, you can see exactly what you did." She ran her hand along the edge of the cut. "My work is mostly invisible. Systems, processes, workflows. The company works better and you can measure it, but you can't touch it." She looked up at the platform taking shape above them. "This you can touch." He looked at her for a moment. "Your work isn't invisible," he said. "You told me about your mother, about why you built it. That's real. It's just different." She looked at the board. "Your mother would have liked this," he said. "The thing you built." She didn't say anything. She picked up another board and marked the measurement line. Logan watched her and said nothing more, because he'd learned when to leave a thing where it landed. Oh, the platform was framed by late afternoon. It was 12 feet up, situated in the fork of the oak's 2 largest limbs, designed to sit against the tree rather than on it, supported by the structural bolts through the heartwood, but resting against the natural saddle of the limbs, the way a hand rests in another hand. The railing posts were in. The decking was down, 2/3 of it, the last few boards for the following Saturday. They sat on it as the sun went down. All 5 of them, Logan, Madison, Noah, Marcus, and Teo, sitting on the unfinished platform 12 feet up, the city spread out in every direction through the leaves. The park below was quiet in the way parks went quiet in the evening, the last dog walkers finishing their loops, the light going honey-colored and long. Teo ate a sandwich. Marcus looked at the boltwork with professional satisfaction. Noah was cross-legged at the edge, looking out at the park with the expression of a person taking inventory of something they've waited for. "It needs a name," Noah said. "Does it?" Logan said. "Everything needs a name." "What do you want to call it?" Noah thought about this for a long moment, with the seriousness he brought to things that required getting right. "The cambium," he said. Marcus looked at Logan. "What's a cambium?" "The living layer," Madison said, "between the bark and the wood. It's how the tree grows. Most people don't know it's there." Marcus considered this. "That's a good name," he said. Noah nodded. He'd already known it was a good name. A Sunday in August, 2 weeks after the platform was finished. They were in the treehouse. It felt right to call it that now, fully, without qualification. The 3 of them, on a morning that was warm enough that Logan had brought a thermos of coffee, and Madison had brought fruit from the farmer's market, and Noah had brought the frog notebook and a new box of colored pencils. He'd been drawing for most of the morning, the kind of focused drawing that existed outside conversation, his head bent over the page, the pencils moving with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what they were making. Logan and Madison talked quietly. About the week, she'd had a difficult board call, a director who'd been skeptical since the Singapore delay and who had used the closed deal as an opportunity to relitigate her decision-making rather than to let it rest. She'd handled it, but handling things was different from not having to handle them, and she was tired in the specific way that came from dealing with people who questioned your judgment, not because they had better information, but because the questioning gave them leverage. "What did you say?" Logan asked. "I said the outcome justified the process, and that the board's job was to evaluate results, not method, and that if they disagreed, they knew where the shareholder agreement was." "That's direct." "He pushed me." She peeled a piece of mango. "I don't mind being pushed when it's honest." He wasn't being honest. He was being territorial. She looked at the leaves moving at the edge of the platform. "I'm tired of explaining myself to people who made up their minds before they sat down." "Then stop." She looked at him. "Not the explaining in general. The explaining to people who aren't listening." He poured more coffee. "You know what you're doing. You've proved it 6 times over. Some people are not going to give you the room you deserve, and it's not a problem you can solve by explaining better." She looked at him for a moment. "You sound like you've thought about this." I watched a lot of good tradesmen get talked over on job sites for years by people who'd never driven a nail. He handed her the cup. It's the same thing. Some people mistake not being questioned for being right. She took the coffee. She turned it in her hands the way she always did. I forget sometimes, she said, that you see things clearly. I see things slowly. It took me a while. That's not the same as not seeing them. He looked at her. She looked back. Between them, the morning moved at its own pace, the city audible below but muted, the oak tree doing what the oak tree did, growing, breathing, the cambium layer adding its invisible ring. Noah looked up from his notebook. I'm done, he said. He held it up. It was a drawing, in colored pencil, of 3 people sitting on a wooden platform in a tree. The tree was the oak. He'd gotten the bark texture right, the knots, the spread of the limbs. The platform was the cambium, recognizable from the railing posts and the specific angle of the access ladder. The 3 people were stick figures in the loose sense, but not quite. They had faces, carefully done, and the man on the left had the particular set of shoulders that was Logan, the way he sat when he wasn't thinking about sitting. The woman on the right had dark hair down and her legs folded and one hand around a cup. The child in the middle was sitting cross-legged with a book in his lap. Beneath the drawing, in Noah's deliberate printing, were 3 words. Our family, us. Logan looked at the drawing. He didn't trust himself to speak for a moment. He looked at the pencil lines, at the careful bark texture, at the 3 figures on the platform. He looked at the words his son had written with the plain certainty of a child who had decided something was true and written it down in the same notebook where he'd recorded the measurements of an oak tree and the citations of a letter to a teacher who didn't understand root systems. Madison was looking at the drawing too. Her face was doing the thing it did when she thought no one was watching. That open, undefended quality, the look of a person who had not expected to feel this much and was still working out what to do with it. She was not a crier, and she didn't cry now, but her jaw moved slightly, and she looked at Noah with something that didn't have a clean name. Can I keep this? She asked. Noah considered the question with appropriate gravity. It's yours, he said. I made it for you. She took the notebook page when he carefully tore it out along the margin. She held it with both hands. She looked at it for a long moment. Thank you, she said. It was a different kind of thank you than she usually delivered. Not the professional one, not the managed one. The stripped-down version, the kind that came from somewhere she didn't administer. Noah nodded and picked up the green pencil and went back to drawing. Logan told her he loved her on a Wednesday evening in September. He hadn't planned to say it on a Wednesday. He hadn't planned the timing at all, which was unusual for him. He was a man who thought about what he was going to say before he said it, who measured things before he cut them. But she was at the apartment, sitting at the kitchen table with the 3rd chair pulled over, the one that had been pulled over so many times now that it had effectively become the 3rd chair. And she was helping Noah with a school presentation on ecosystems while Logan washed dishes at the sink. He was not watching them. He was washing the soup pot, the one he'd made the first dinner she came to, the one Noah had told him to make for her because people without anyone to make them soup were cold. He heard her explain something about the water cycle in the way she explained things. Precise but not condescending, finding the interesting thread in it. And he heard Noah correct a detail she'd gotten slightly wrong and heard her say, "You're right, I misspoke," with the same flat directness she used for everything. And he heard Noah say, "It's okay, it's complicated," with the generosity of a child who understood imperfection. He stood at the sink. He thought about the restaurant in the snow. He thought about the woman at the next table pretending to look at her phone. He thought about what it had taken for both of them to get from there to here. The walls that came down slowly and expensively. The arguments with weight behind them. The canceled plans and the kept promises. And the night she'd sat at a desk at 2 a.m. and chosen something she'd never chosen before. He thought about Claire. He thought about grief and what it actually was. Not the sharp thing, not the early version, but the later version, the one that lived alongside you, that didn't leave but changed shape, that became over time less like a wound and more like a scar. Evidence of what happened, part of who you were, no longer in charge. He dried the pot. He hung it on the hook. He turned around. Madison was looking at him over Noah's head. She must have felt him standing there. She had the quiet attention on her face, the particular kind that was just for him. Not analyzing, not managing, just looking. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Noah was drawing something in his notebook, not listening. "I love you," Logan said. It came out plainly, not performed, not packaged, not preceded by anything. Just the words, said the way he said the honest things, like they'd been true for a while and he was just now saying them out loud. Madison looked at him. The kitchen was what it was. Small, slightly cluttered, the light above the sink the yellow kind that didn't flatter anything. Noah's markers were spread across the table. The third chair was pulled out at its usual angle. The pot was on the hook. "I know," she said. He looked at her. "I mean," she stopped. She looked at the table for a moment, then back at him. "I'm not saying it back like that on purpose. I'm saying I've known for a while and I've been..." She paused. "I've been figuring out how to say it. The right way. Not the managed way. You don't have to say it the right way. I want to." She looked at him steadily. "I want it to be real when I say it. Not a response. Not me matching you because you said it first." He waited. She folded her hands on the table. She looked at them, then at him. "I've spent 10 years building something, and I was proud of it, and I still am. But I came home every night to nothing, and I had trained myself to not notice that, to call it focus, to call it sacrifice, to call it the cost of doing something important." She paused. "And then I was sat up by someone's assistant at a restaurant in the snow, and a man I'd never met told me about his son and the library and a composition book with a frog on the cover, and I sat at a table for two for a long time after I should have left, because I didn't want to go back to the penthouse." Noah had stopped drawing. He was listening with the careful neutrality of a child who knows when to be quiet. "I love you," she said. "I've loved you since the hardware store, probably. I was just slower getting here." Logan looked at her across the small kitchen. He thought about the building from 1910 with good bones. He thought about what it took to see the thing underneath, the structure that held, the invisible layer where the living happened. He thought about a man who was afraid and showed up anyway. A woman who was armored and took the armor off piece by piece in hardware stores and parks and kitchens until there was just a person standing there. A child who had decided that 3 people sitting on a platform in a tree was enough to write the word family under. "Okay," he said. He was smiling. "Okay? That's the real version. I told you you didn't have to say it the right way, but that was the right way." She shook her head slightly. "You're impossible." "I've been told." Noah looked between the two of them with the expression of a judge who has heard sufficient evidence and is prepared to render a decision. "Can we have the ice cream now?" he said. "This seems like it qualifies." Logan laughed. Madison put her hand over her mouth. Noah was already up and at the freezer, pulling out the carton with the efficiency of a child who had been patient long enough and had earned this. October. The oak tree had started its turn. The leaves were going amber at the edges first, the way old things changed, from the outside in, slowly, with dignity. The park had the dense, specific smell of Chicago fall, earth and cold, and the particular sweetness of things completing their cycle. The 3 of them were in the cambium on a Sunday morning. Madison had bought chairs. Real chairs, not the folding kind, not a temporary measure, but 3 low wooden chairs with cushions, carried up the access ladder one at a time on a Saturday 2 weeks ago, while Noah supervised from the platform, and Logan pretended not to be moved by the fact that she'd bought 3. She had also, finally, gotten the chairs for the breakfast nook. She had told Logan about it with the slight embarrassment of someone confessing a thing that revealed more than they'd intended. He had said, "About time." She had said, "Don't make it a thing." He had said, "I'm absolutely making it a thing." She had thrown a dish towel at him, and he had caught it, and they'd both laughed. And that had been the whole of it, which was exactly the right amount. She had also, 3 weeks ago, gotten a dog. A small, ridiculous terrier mix from a rescue organization, with ears that didn't agree on which direction they wanted to point, and a personality that could only be described as aggressively optimistic. Noah had named him Newton on the grounds that he seemed to be governed by his own laws. Newton had immediately claimed the couch as his, and had regarded Logan on his first visit to the penthouse with Madison present with the suspicious assessment of an animal that took its security responsibilities seriously. "He likes you," Madison said when Newton had sniffed Logan's shoe for 45 seconds and then sat on his foot. "Is that what that is?" For Newton, sitting on your foot is a significant compliment. Newton was not in the cambium. He was below, with Ferris, who had developed a fondness for the dog and who Newton had decided, after careful evaluation, was an acceptable human. They could hear him below, his small, determined footsteps on the path. Noah was reading. Logan was working on a sketch, a structural concept for a project he'd been approached about, a renovation on a building in Bridgeport that had good bones and bad decisions made to it over 40 years. Madison was looking out through the amber leaves at the city. She was thinking about her mother. She did this sometimes up here. Thought about her mother in a way that wasn't painful in the way it used to be. The grief was still real. It didn't go anywhere. But there was a quality to it that had changed in the last year. A shift she hadn't engineered and couldn't entirely explain. Something to do with the chairs in the breakfast nook and the dog with the disagreeing ears and the small kitchen in Pilsen where someone had hung a pot on a hook and turned around and said something plain and true. She thought about her mother coming home saying, "I don't understand why it has to be this hard." She thought, "It doesn't have to be this hard. Not all of it. Not this part." "What are you thinking about?" Logan asked without looking up from his sketch. "My mother." He put the pencil down. He looked at her. "Good thinking or hard thinking?" he asked. "Both." She looked at the leaves. "I've been thinking about what she would make of all this." "What do you think she'd make of it?" "I think she'd like you." A pause. "I think she'd love Noah. She had a weakness for serious children." Madison turned the coffee cup. She still did this, the habit of years, something to do with her hands when she was thinking. "I think she'd tell me I took too long." "Did you?" "Probably." She looked at him. "But I got here." "You got here," he said. Below them, Newton barked once at something. A squirrel, probably, or a dropped coffee cup, or simply the offense of the world existing without his permission, and then went quiet. Ferris's guitar floated up through the leaves. Noah turned a page. The oak tree breathed around them, its cambium layer adding its invisible increment, the whole enormous patient structure of it doing what it had done for 100 years, growing, holding, putting down roots in every direction that no one could see from the outside. There's a thing that nobody tells you about the life you're trying to build. They tell you about the milestones, the achievements, the moments of arrival, the things you can point to and name. They don't tell you about the ordinary Sundays. The mornings on platforms in old trees with bad coffee and a dog below and a child reading and someone next to you that you didn't plan for and couldn't have manufactured and found anyway in a restaurant in the snow because you were both stubborn enough to stay and eat. They don't tell you that ordinary is what you were working toward all along. They don't tell you that showing up, not perfectly, not without fear, not without the history you carry, is the whole of it. That the love worth having is not the love that finds you when everything is ready. It's the love that finds you in the middle of the hard years, when you're still rebuilding, when you're not sure you have enough left to give, when you have a son who worries about oak trees and a penthouse with no chairs in the breakfast nook, and a fake name you gave a stranger because you were too tired to be yourself for one more night, and then you were, anyway, yourself, in a hardware store, in a park, in a kitchen, on a platform 12 feet up in a tree that knew how to hold things without breaking them. Logan Reed had built things his whole life, buildings that would outlast him, structures designed to carry weight without showing it. He knew how to read a foundation, how to see what was holding and what was failing, how to tell the difference between a wall and a load-bearing wall. He looked at the woman beside him, at the boy across from him, at the amber leaves moving in the October light. These were the load-bearing things. Everything else was weather. Noah looked up from his book. "Dad," he said, "Yeah. I think next spring we should plant something under the tree, in the root zone, something that the tree can use." He looked at the plan with the certainty he brought to conclusions that had been researched. Mycorrhizal plants, they help the root network. We'd be giving back. Logan looked at him. "Yeah," he said. "Let's do that." Noah nodded and went back to his book. Madison looked at Logan. Her eyes had that quality again. The open, unmanaged thing. The person behind the CEO, behind the armor, behind the name she'd given a stranger at a table in the snow. He reached over and put his hand over hers. She turned her hand and held it. Below them, Newton barked once more at the world and then sat down, satisfied with his work. Ferris played something slow and low on the guitar. The oak tree stood in the October light, enormous and unhurried, doing what it had always done, growing, holding, putting down roots.